So we've got our practice door here, and we're going to look at the practicalities of latch slipping. So the module that we've got in is a standard latch, and it is all the way back. So we've got a nice great big gap there in which to work. Proprioception, what's that? That is the awareness of the position of bits of your body without having to look. So I know my hand is out like this, I don't have to look at it. I know my fingers are splayed apart, I don't have to look. I know that my current stance is with my leg quite close together, bent over around a camera. I don't have to look to figure out how I'm standing. Now, proprioception isn't perfect. It's a sense like everything else. Sometimes it's more refined in some people than it is in others, and sometimes it's misleading. But being aware of proprioception and how it relates to the ease of use of a tool and how it can make it look and feel more natural is a very useful tool to have to refine your technique. So let's have a look at a traveler hook and work out how proprioception and range of motion work together to make this a really simple tool for discreetly and quickly opening locks. So the traveler hook is held with your thumb pointing down the axis of the tool. And that means that really when I'm going for a latch like that, I'm not really thinking, where does this need to go? I'm thinking, where does the thumb need to point? Where's my thumb going? And then there's a slight offset, obviously, but you get that with practice. And it speeds up the learning curve. It makes it a lot easier to get proficient with this tool because you're just thinking, where's my thumb going? And you're not really having to look that much. That means you can naturally come up to a door and just drop this into position and give it a good twiddle. Now, with regards to the twiddle, you're within the center roughly of your range of motion. So range of motion is, this is how it naturally sits, your hand, and we've got, that's your range of motion rotationally. You obviously got up, down, left, right, all that sort of stuff. But you're roughly within the center of that range of motion, and that means that your hand naturally settles into that position. So you don't have to make any conscious adjustments or anything like that. It just naturally settles like that. And then when you're in the center of that range of motion, that's where your fine motor control is, which makes it a lot easier to manipulate this exactly how you want it to be and reduces the error at the end of the tool, and we'll see that in a second. I mean, it's quite obvious that if you were to hold this, even though I've got a good grip of it like this, even though my hand wants to rotate in that direction, because I'm at the limit of my range of motion, this is far harder to actually get into position. Even though my body wants to rotate in the correct direction, I'm at the limit of that range. And we'll see with the longer one here. Now, this is meant to come down the top and twiddle. And you can bypass any latch slip guards and that sort of thing. But you'll see that if I'm doing that, my fine motor control at that kind of position isn't great, and that's worsened by the fact I'm working around this camera. But it's not great, and it means that the error, these slight vibrations in my hand, become quite significant at the top. And it's not a brilliant demonstration because I am working behind this camera, but when I am coming down, it makes it a lot harder to get that in position quickly, discreetly. You can do it, you can absolutely practice that, and were the camera not there, I would be able to do that quite quickly, but it means that it requires a lot more practice, and it's being aware of how proprioception and your range of motion come together to make a tool easier or harder to use, especially under adverse conditions, and we'll see that in a second. So where does this leave my favourite tool, the long-handled Slim Jim? Well, it does actually mean that it's more difficult to use. It requires a bit more practice, and that's because there is flex. So when you are using a traveler hook, you know full well that any movement of your hand is perfectly transmitted into the end. So that Proprioception means that you know what your hand is doing, therefore you know what the tool is doing. With this, not so much, because you've got that flex, and it doesn't mean it's impossible to use without looking, and it doesn't mean that you can't be slick with it. It just means that it's going to take a little bit more practice, because there's that extra variable that you have to integrate into your muscle memory, and it's just being aware of that. And then also you have the other issues of it being at the range of motion, and you can see that the shaking of my hand, all right, there we go. You can see the shaking of my hand is exaggerated because of the length of the tool. And again, these are things you need to be aware of when you are perfecting your technique. Now, I'm not normally going to hold it like that because it's a stupid way of holding it, and I'm doing it around a camera, which is why there's so much shaking there. But if you're using this in the field, you can mitigate any flex by holding it as close as possible to the end of the tool, and it makes it very easy to use. We're indexing our thumb down there, and unlike the traveller hook, I'm struggling because I'm at a funny angle here. Unlike the traveller hook, we've got less of an offset as well, so our thumb is very close to where we actually want the tool to go, and then it's just a matter of the twiddle in order to push that latch back with the spade end, and we're pivoting with this section against the door frame. I have modified a mini gym that gives me a little bit extra control, and it gives me more ergonomic use. So we saw that when I was trying to use it, it was a sort of a funny angle. Your hand doesn't drop into that kind of angle. And while yes, you can index this against your wrist, which actually does help quite a bit, it's not quite as natural. And the problem is, when you're doing something like that, you're handling a long tool, it's hard to look natural. People are going to notice that you are not holding your hands quite normally. So the foldable tool works quite nicely, and you can, the way I've set this up, you can sort of twiddle it around and it'll lock into this position, and that means you've got a bit of a pistol grip type thing going on here. What does that mean? Well, it means that when you come to use it, your thumb is again pointing to where it needs to go. Perfect. And on top of that, my hand is in an almost completely neutral position. So it's in the same position as it would be if I was using a key. So any passerby, that looks fairly natural. Yes, they might notice that I'm not putting this in the lock, but it still looks fairly natural. They're just going to ignore it usually. It's not a normal, unnatural behavior. And I get perfect control. I've got this, which gives me a great grip over the entirety of the tool. If I was just holding it by this bit, I wouldn't really have that control. And I've got natural control of the tool. Everything about that is ergonomic. This is our firefighter or police entry tool. So the grip is what's important here. You can see we've got thumb down the axis of the tool that we're operating. We've got a neutral grip. This is to be able to be used in situations where you've got water pouring on you, you've got heat, you've got protective clothing. Doesn't matter, you can use it. And it's not a zero damage tool. You're going to leave scratch marks, but it's better than bashing the door open. And again, it's that sort of pistol grip thing. Good control, nice and easy to index. We can also use this, just make sure it's closed, yeah. And we can slide it down the frame, give it a bit of a wiggle, and it will push the door open for you as this expands. It's a really useful tool. Not a covert entry tool, obviously, but we can understand how best to use our tools by looking at these tools that are meant for use in adverse environments. And again, we've got that grip there as we're coming up underneath. Yes, we're not pointing a thumb down the axis of the tool towards the business end, but we're in a nice neutral position with our hand as we bring it up and then flick. So very useful tool, but not a covert entry tool. It's 2mm thick as well, so it is potentially going to leave scratch marks, and it's big and bulky, but we can just look at the ergonomics of it and understand how that can improve our use of our smaller, more fiddly tools.